Carlos Castaneda's The Second Ring of Power, Chapter 5, The Art of Dreaming, Part 1. The next day I was by myself all morning. I worked on my notes. In the afternoon, I used my car to help LaGorda and the little sisters transport the furniture from Donna Soledad's house to their house. In the early evening, LaGorda and I sat in the dining area alone. We were silent for a while. I was very tired. LaGorda broke the silence and said that all of them had been too complacent since the narwhal and Gennaro had left. Each of them had been absorbed in his or her own particular task. He said that the narwhal had commanded her to be an impassionate warrior and to follow whatever path her fate selected for her. If Soledad had stolen my power, LaGorda had to flee and try to save the little sisters, and then join Benigno and Nesta, the only two Gennaros who would have survived. If the little sisters had killed me, she had to join the Gennaros because the little sisters would have had no more need to be with her. If I had not survived the attack of the Allies, and she did, she had to leave that area and be on her own. She told me with a glint in her eye that she had been sure that neither one of us would survive, and that was why she said goodbye to her sisters, to her house, and to the hills. The narwhal told me that in case you and I survived, missed the page here, that in case you and I survived the Allies, she went on, I have to do anything for you, because that would be my warrior's path. That was why I interfered with what Benigno was doing to you last night. He was pressing on your chest with his eyes. That is his art as a stalker. You saw Pablito's hand earlier yesterday. That was also part of the same art. Excuse me. What art is that, LaGorda? The art of the stalker. That was the narwhal's predilection. And the Gennaros are his true children at that. We, on the other hand, are dreamers. Your double is dreaming. What she was saying was new to me. I wanted her to elucidate her statements. I paused for a moment to read what I had written in order to select the most appropriate question. I told her that I first wanted to find out what she knew about my double, and then I wanted to know about the art of stalking. The narwhal told me that your double is something that takes a lot of power to come out, she said. He figured that you might have enough energy to get it out of you twice. That's why he set up Soledad and the little sisters, either to kill you or to help you. LaGorda said that I had more energy than the narwhal thought, and that my double came out 3 times. Apparently, Rosa's attack had not been a thoughtless action. On the contrary, she had very cleverly calculated that if she injured me, I would have been helpless. The same ploy Donna Soledad had tried with her dog. I had given Rosa a chance to strike me when I yelled at her, but she failed to injure me. My double came out and injured her instead. LaGorda said that Lydia had told her that Rosa did not want to wake up when all of us had to rush out of Soledad's house. So Lydia squeezed the hand that had been injured. Rosa did not feel any pain and knew in an instant that I had cured her, which meant to them that I had drained my power. LaGorda affirmed that the little sisters were very clever and had planned to drain me of power, and to that effect they had kept on insisting that I cure Soledad. As soon as Rosa realized that I had also cured her, she thought I had weakened myself beyond repair. All they had to do was to wait for Josefina in order to finish me off. The little sisters didn't know that when you cured Rosa and Soledad, you also replenished yourself, LaGorda said, and laughed as if it were a joke. That was why you had enough energy to get your double out a 3rd time, when the little sisters tried to take your luminosity. I told her about the vision I had had of Donna Soledad huddled against the wall of a room, and how I had merged that vision with my tactile sense and ended up feeling a viscous substance on her forehead. That was true seeing, Lagorda said. You saw Soledad in her room, although she was with me around Gennaro's place. And then you saw your narwhal on her forehead. I felt compelled at that point to recount to her the details of my whole experience, especially the realization I had had that I was actually curing Donna Soledad and Rosa by touching the viscous substance which I felt was a part of me. To see that thing on Rosa's hand was true seeing, she said. And you were absolutely right. That substance was yourself. It came out of your body, and it was your narwhal. By touching it, you pulled it back. Lagorda told me then, as though she were unveiling a mystery, that the narwhal had commanded her not to disclose the fact that since all of us had the same luminosity, if my narwhal touched one of them, I would not get weakened, as would ordinarily be the case if my narwhal touched an average man. If your narwhal touches us, she said, giving me a gentle slap on the head, your luminosity stays on the surface. You can pick it up again, and nothing is lost. I told her that the content of her explanation was impossible for me to believe. She shrugged her shoulders, as if saying that was not any of her concern. I asked her then about her usage of the word narwhal. I said that Don Juan had explained the narwhal to me as being the indescribable principle, the source of everything. Sure, she said, smiling. I know what he meant. The narwhal is in everything. I pointed out to her a bit scornfully that one could also say the opposite, that the tonal is in everything. She carefully explained that there was no opposition that my statement was correct. The tonal was also in everything. She said that the tonal, which is in everything, could be easily apprehended by our senses, while the narwhal, which is in everything, manifested itself only to the eye of the sorcerer. She added that we could stumble upon the most outlandish sights of the tonal and be scared of them, or be awed by them, or indifferent to them, because all of us could view the sights. A sight of the narwhal, on the other hand, needed the specialized senses of a sorcerer in order to be seen at all. And yet both the tonal and the narwhal were present in everything at all times. It was appropriate, therefore, for a sorcerer to say that looking consisted in viewing the tonal, which is in everything, and seeing, on the other hand, consisted of viewing the narwhal, which is also in everything. Accordingly, if a warrior observed the world as a human being, he was looking, but he observed it as a sorcerer, he was seeing. And what he was seeing had to be properly called the narwhal. Excuse me again. She then reiterated the reason which Nestor had given me earlier for calling Don Juan the narwhal, and confirmed that I was also the narwhal because of the shape that came out of my head. I wanted to know why they had called the shape that came out of my head the double. She said that they had thought they were sharing a private joke with me. They had always called that shape the double because it was twice the size of the person who had it. Nestor told me that shape was not such a good thing to have, I said. It's neither good nor bad, she said. You have it, and it makes you the narwhal. That's all. One of us 8 had to be the narwhal, and you're the one. It might have been Pablito or me or anyone. Tell me now, what is the art of stalking, I asked. The narwhal was a stalker, she said, and peered at me. You must know that. He taught you to stalk from the beginning. It occurred to me that what she might be referring to was what Don Juan had called the hunter. He had certainly taught me to be a hunter. I told her that Don Juan had shown me how to hunt and make traps. Her usage of the term stalker, however, was more accurate. A hunter just hunts, she said. A stalker stalks anything, including himself. How does he do that? An impeccable stalker can turn anything into prey. The narwhal told me that we can even stalk our own weaknesses. I stopped writing and tried to remember if Don Juan had ever presented me with such a novel possibility to stalk my weaknesses. I could not recall him ever putting it in those terms. How can one stalk one's weaknesses, Cora? The same way you stalk prey. You figure out your routines until you know all the doing of your weaknesses, and then you come upon them and pick them up like rabbits inside a cage. Don Juan had taught me the same thing about routines, but in the vein of a general principle that hunters must be aware of. Her understanding and application of it, however, were more pragmatic than mine. Don Juan had said that any habit was, in essence, a doing, and that a doing needed all its parts in order to function. If some parts were missing, a doing was disassembled. By doing, he meant any coherent and meaningful series of actions. In other words, a habit needed all its component actions in order to be a live activity. LaGuardia then described how she had stalked her own weakness of eating excessively. She said that the narwhal had suggested that she first tackle the biggest part of that habit, which was connected with her laundry work. She ate whenever her customers fed her as she went from house to house, delivering her wash. She expected the narwhal to tell her what to do, but only laughed and made fun of her, saying that as soon as he would mention something for her to do, she would fight not to do it. He said that was the way human beings are. They love to be told what to do, but they love even more to fight and not do what they are told to do. And thus, they get entangled in hating the one who told them that in the first place. For many years, she could not think of anything to do to stalk her weakness. One day, however, she got so sick and tired of being fat that she refused to eat for 23 days. That was the initial action that broke her fixation. She then had the idea of stuffing her mouth with a sponge to make her customers believe that she had an infected tooth and could not eat. The subterfuge worked, and not only were her customers who stopped giving her food, but with her as well as she had the feeling of eating as she chewed on the sponge. LaGuardia laughed when she told me how she had walked around with a sponge stuffed in her mouth for years until her habit of eating excessively had been broken. Was that all you needed to stop your habit, I asked. No, I also had to learn how to eat like a warrior. And how does a warrior eat? A warrior eats quietly and slowly and very little at a time. I used to talk while I ate. I ate very fast. I ate lots and lots of food in one sitting. The narwhal told me that a warrior eats 4 mouthfuls of food at one time. A while later, he eats another 4 mouthfuls, and so on. A warrior also walks miles and miles every day. My eating weakness never let me walk. I broke it by eating 4 mouthfuls every hour and by walking. Sometimes I walked all day and all night. That was the way I lost the fat on my buttocks. She laughed at her own recollection of the nickname Don Juan had given her. But stalking your weakness is not enough to drop them, she said. You can stalk them from now until doomsday, and it won't make a bit of difference. That's why the narwhal didn't want to tell me what to do. What a warrior really needs in order to be an impeccable stalker is to have a purpose. LaGuardia recounted how she had lived from day to day before she met the narwhal, with nothing to look forward to. She had no hopes, no dreams, no desire for anything. The opportunity to eat, however, was always accessible to her. For some reason that she could not fathom, there had been plenty of food available to her every single day of her life. So much of it, in fact, that at one time she weighed 236 pounds. Eating was the only thing I enjoyed in life. Lagorda said. Besides, I never saw myself as being fat. I thought I was rather pretty and that people liked me as I was. Everyone said that I looked healthy. The narwhal told me something very strange. He said that I had an enormous amount of personal power, and due to that, I had always managed to get food from friends, while the relatives in my house were going hungry. Everybody has enough personal power for something. The trick for me was to pull my personal power away from food to my warrior's purpose. And what is that purpose, Lagorda? I asked her, half in jest. To enter into the other world, she replied, with a grin. And pretended to hit me on the top of my head with her knuckles. The way Don Juan used to do when he thought I was indulging. There was no more light for me to write. I wanted her to bring a lantern, but she complained that she was too tired and had to sleep a bit more before the little sisters arrived. We went into the front room. She gave me a blanket, then wrapped herself in another one and fell asleep instantly. I sat with my back against the wall. The brick surface of the bed was hard, even with 4 straw mats. It was more comfortable to lie down. The moment I did, I fell asleep. I woke up suddenly with an unbearable thirst. I wanted to go to the kitchen to drink some water, but I could not orientate myself in the darkness. I could feel Lagorda bundled up in the blanket next to me. I shook her 2 or 3 times and asked her to help me get some water. She grumbled some unintelligible words. She apparently was so sound asleep that she did not want to wake up. I shook her again, and suddenly she woke up, only it was not Lagorda. Whoever I was shaking yelled at me in a gruff masculine voice to shut up. There was a man there in place of Lagorda. My fright was instantaneous and uncontrollable. I jumped out of bed and ran for the front door. But my sense of orientation was off, and I ended up out in the kitchen. I grabbed the lantern and lit it as fast as I could. Lagorda came out of the outhouse in the back at the moment and asked me if there was something wrong. I nervously told her what had happened. She seemed a bit disorientated herself. Her mouth was open and her eyes had lost their usual sheen. She shook her head vigorously, and that seemed to restore her alertness. She took the lantern and we walked into the front room. There was no one in the bed. Lagorda lit 3 more lanterns. She appeared to be worried. She told me to stay where I was, then she opened the door to their room. I noticed that there was light coming from inside. She closed the door again and said in a matter-of-fact tone not to worry, that it was nothing, and that she was going to make us something to eat. With the speed and efficiency of a short-order cook, she made some food. She also made a hot chocolate drink with cornmeal. We sat across from each other and ate in complete silence. The night was cold. It looked as if it was going to be rain. The 3 kerosene lamps that she had brought to the dining area cast a yellowish light and was very soothing. She took some boards that were stacked up on the floor against the wall and placed them vertically in a deep groove on the transverse supporting the beam on the roof. There was a long slit in the floor parallel to the beam that served to hold the boards in place. The result was a portable wall that enclosed the dining area. Who was in the bed? I asked. In bed next to you was Josephina. Who else? She said. Who else? She said. She replied as if savoring her words, and then laughed. She's a master at jokes like that. For a moment I thought it was something else, but then I caught the scent that Josephina's body has when she's carrying out one of her pranks. What was she trying to do? Scare me to death? I asked. You're not their favorite, you know, she replied. They don't like to be taken out of the path they're familiar with. They hate the fact that Soledad is leaving. They don't want to understand that we are all leaving this area. It looks like our time is up. I knew that today. As I left the house, I felt that those barren hills out there were making me tired. I had never felt that way until today. Where are you going to go? I don't know yet. It looks as if that depends on you, on your power. On me? In what way, Gorda? Let me explain. The day before you arrived, the little sisters and I went to the city. I wanted to find you in the city because I had a very strange vision in my dreaming. And that vision, I was in the city and with you, and I saw you in my vision as plainly as I see you now. You didn't know who I was, but you talked to me. I couldn't make out what you said. I went back to the same vision 3 times, but I was not strong enough in my dreaming to find out what you were saying to me. I figured that my vision was telling me that I had to go to the city and trust my power to find you there. I was sure that you were on your way. Did the little sisters know why you took them to the city, I asked. I didn't tell them anything, she replied. I just took them there. We wandered around the streets all morning. Her statements put me in a very strange frame of mind. Spasms of nervous excitation ran through my entire body. I had to stand up and walk around for a moment. I sat down again and told her that I had been in the city that same day and that I had wandered around the marketplace all afternoon looking for Don Juan. She stared at me with her mouth open. We must have passed each other, she said, and sighed. We were in the market and in the park. We sat on the steps of the church most of the afternoon so as to not attract attention to ourselves. The hotel where I had stayed was practically next door to the church. I remembered that I stood there for a long time looking at the people on the steps of the church. Something was pulling me to examine them. I had the absurd notion that both Don Juan and Don Gennaro were going to be among those people, sitting like beggars, just to surprise me. When did you leave the city, I asked. We left around 5 o'clock and headed for the Nawal spot in the mountains, she replied. I had also had a certainty that Don Juan had left at the end of the day. The feelings I had had during the entire episode of looking for Don Juan became very clear to me. In light of what she had told me, I had to revise my stand. I had conveniently explained away the certainty I had had that Don Juan was there in the streets of the city as an irrational expectation as a result of my consistently finding him there in the past. But LaGuardia had been in the city, actually looking for me, and she being closest to Don Juan in temperament. I had felt all along that his presence was there. LaGuardia's statement had merely confirmed something that my body knew beyond the shadow of a doubt. I noticed a flutter of nervousness in her body when I told her the details of my mood that day. I did this, I'm leaving this over here. Oh, okay, I couldn't find something here. What would have happened if you had found me, I asked. Everything would have changed, she replied. For me to find you would have meant that I had power to move forward. That's why I took the little sisters with me. All of us, you, me, and the little sisters, would have gone away together that day. Where to, Gorda? Who knows? If I had the power to find you, I would have also had the power to know that. It's your turn now. Perhaps you will have enough power now to know where we should go. Now, do you see what I mean? I had an attack of profound sadness at that point. I felt more acutely than ever the despair of my human frailty and temporariness. Don Juan had always maintained that the only deterrent to our despair was the awareness of our death, the key to the sorcerer's scheme of things. His idea was that the awareness of our death was the only thing that could give us the strength to withstand the duress and pain of our lives and our fears of the unknown. But what he could never tell me was how to bring that awareness to the foreground. He had insisted every time I had asked him that my volition alone was the deciding factor. In other words, I had to make up my mind to bring that awareness to bear witness to my acts. I thought I had done so, But confronted with Lagorda's determination to find me and go away with me, I realized that if she had found me in the city that day, I would never have returned to my home. Never again would I have seen those I held dear. I had not been prepared for that. I had braced myself for dying, not for disappearing for the rest of my life in full awareness, without anger or disappointment, leaving behind the best of my feelings. I was almost embarrassed to tell Lagorda that I was not a warrior worthy of having that kind of power. That kind of power that must have needed to perform an act of that nature, to leave for good and to know where to go and what to do. We are human creatures, she said. Who knows what's waiting for us or what kind of power we may have? I told her that my sadness in leaving like that was too great. The changes that sorcerers went through were too drastic and too final. I recounted to her what Pablito had told me about his unbearable sadness at having lost his mother. The human form feeds itself on those feelings, she said dryly. I pitied myself and my little children for years. I couldn't understand how the Nawal could be so cruel to ask me to do what I did, to leave my children, to destroy them and forget them. She said that it took her years to understand that the Nawal had also had to choose to leave the human form. He was not being cruel. He simply did not have any more human feelings. To him, everything was equal. He had accepted his fate. The problem with Pablito and myself, for that matter, was that neither of us had accepted our fate. Lagorda said, in a scornful way, that Pablito wept when he remembered his mother, his Manuelito, especially when he had to cook his own food. She urged me to remember that Pablito's mother was, as she was, an old, stupid woman who knew nothing else but to be Pablito's servant. She said that the reason all of them thought he was a coward was because he could not be happy that his servant Manuelita had become the witch Soledad who could kill him like she could step on a bug. Lagorda stood up dramatically and leaned over the table until her forehead was almost touching mine. The Nawal said that Pablito's good fortune was extraordinary, she said. Mother and son fighting for the same thing. If he weren't the coward he is, he would accept his fate and oppose Soledad like a warrior, without fear or hatred. In the end, the best would win and take all. If Soledad was the winner, Pablito should be happy with his fate and wish her well. But only a real warrior can feel that kind of happiness. How does Donna Soledad feel about all this? She doesn't indulge in her feelings, Lagorda replied, as she sat down. She has accepted her fate more readily than any one of us. Before the Nawal helped her, she was worse off than myself. At least I was young. She was an old cow, fat and tired, begging for her death to come. Now death will have to fight to claim her. The time element in Donna Soledad's transformation was a detail that had puzzled me. I told Lagorda that I remembered having seen Donna Soledad no more than 2 years before, and she was the same old lady I had always known. Lagorda said that the last time I had been in Soledad's house, under the impression that it was still Pablito's house, the Nawal had set them up to act as if everything were the same. Donna Soledad greeted me, as she always did, from the kitchen, and I really did not face her. Lydia, Rosa, Pablito, Nesta played their roles to perfection in order to keep me from finding out about their true activities. Why would the Nawal go through all that trouble, Gorda? He was saving you for something that's not clear yet. He kept you away from every one of us deliberately. He and Gennaro told me never to show my face when you were around. Did he tell Josefina the same thing? Yes, she's crazy and can't help herself. She wanted to play her pranks on you. She used to follow you around, and you never knew it. One night when the Nawal had taken you to the mountains, she nearly pushed you down a ravine in the darkness. The Nawal found her in the nick of time. She doesn't do those things out of meanness, but because she enjoys being that way. That's her human form. She'll be that way until she loses it. I told you that all 6 of them are a bit off. You must be aware of that so as not to be caught in their webs. If you do get caught, don't get angry. They can't help themselves. She was silent for a while. I caught the almost imperceptible sign of a flutter in her body. Her eyes seemed to get out of focus, and her mouth dropped as if the muscles of her jaws had given in. I became engrossed in watching her. She shook her head 2 or 3 times. I've been seeing something, she said. You're just like the little sisters in Gennaro. She began to laugh quietly. I did not say anything. I wanted her to explain herself without being meddling. Everybody gets angry with you because it hasn't dawned on them yet that you're no different than they are, she went on. They see you as a narwhal, and they don't understand that you indulge in your ways just like they do in theirs. She said that Pablito whined and complained and played at being a weakling. Benigno played at being the shy one, the one who could not even open his eyes. Nestor played to be the wise one, the one who knows everything. Lydia played the tough woman who could crush anyone with a look. Josefina was the crazy one who could not be trusted. And Rosa was the bad-tempered girl who ate the mosquitoes that bit her. And I was the fool that came from Los Angeles with a pad of paper and a lot of wrong questions. And all of us loved to be the way we were. I was once a fat, smelly woman, she went on after a pause. I didn't mind being kicked around like a dog as long as I was not alone. That was my form. A human being, that was my form. I will have to tell everybody that I have seen about you so they won't feel offended by your acts. I don't know what to say. I felt she was undeniably right. The important issue for me was not so much her accurateness, but the fact that I had witnessed her arriving at her unquestionable conclusion. Why did you see all that? I asked. It just came to me, she replied. How did it come to you? I felt the feeling of seeing coming to the top of my head, and then I knew what I've just told you. I insisted that she describe to me every detail of feeling of seeing she had that she was alluding to. She complained after a moment's facilitation and gave me an account of the same ticklish sensation I had become so aware of during my confrontations with Donna Soledad and the Little Sisters. Lagorda said that the sensation started at the top of her head and then went down her back and around her waist to her womb. She felt it inside her body as a consuming ticklishness, which turned into a knowledge that I was clinging to my human form, like all the rest, except that my particular way was incomprehensible to them. Did you hear a voice telling you all that? I asked. No, I just saw everything I've told you about yourself, she replied. I wanted to ask her if she had a vision of me clinging to something, but I desisted. I did not want to indulge in my usual behavior. Besides, I knew what she meant when she said that she saw. The same thing had happened to me when I was with Rosa and Lydia. I suddenly knew where they lived. I did not have a vision of the house. I simply felt that I knew it. I asked her if she had also felt the dry sound of a wooden pipe being broken at the base of her neck. The narwhal taught all of us how to get that feeling on the top of our head, she said. But not every one of us can do it. The sound behind the throat is even more difficult. None of us has ever felt that yet. It is strange that you have when you are still empty. How does the sound work? I asked. What is it? You know that better than I do. What more can I tell you? She replied in a harsh voice. She seemed to catch herself being impatient. She smiled sheepishly and lowered her head. I feel stupid telling you what you already know, she said. Do you ask me questions like that to test me or to see if I've really lost my form? I told her that I was confused, for I had the feeling that I knew what that sound was, and yet it was as if I didn't know anything about it, because for me to know something I actually had to be able to verbalize my knowledge. In this case, I did not even know how to begin to verbalize it. The only thing I could do, therefore, was to ask her questions, hoping that her answers would help. I can't help you with that sound, she said. I experienced a sudden and tremendous discomfort, I told her, that I was habituated to dealing with Don Juan, and that I needed him then more than ever to explain everything to me. Do you miss the Narwhal? She asked. I said that I did, that I had not realized how much I missed him until I was back again in his homeland. You miss him because you're still clinging to your human form, she said, and giggled as if she were delighted at my sadness. Don't you miss him yourself, Gorda? No, not me. I'm him. All my luminosity has been changed. How could I miss something that is myself? How is your luminosity different? A human being or any other living creature has a pale yellow glow. Animals have more yellow, humans are more white, but a sorcerer is amber, like clear honey caught in the sunlight. Some women sorceresses are greenish. The Narwhal said that those are the most powerful and the most difficult. What color are you, Gorda? Amber, just like you and all the rest of us. That's what the Narwhal and Gennaro told me. I've never seen myself, but I've seen everyone else. All of us are amber, and all of us, with the exception of you, are like a tombstone. Average human beings are like eggs. That's why the Narwhal called them luminous eggs. Sorcerers change not only the color of their luminosity, but their shape. They are like tombstones, only we are round at both ends. Am I still shaped like an egg, Gorda? No, you're shaped like a tombstone, except that you have an ugly, dull patch in your middle. As long as you have that patch, you won't be able to fly, like sorcerers fly, like I flew last night for you. You won't even be able to drop your human form. I became entangled in a passionate argument, not so much with her as with myself. I insisted that their stand on how to regain that alleged completeness was simply preposterous. I told her that she could not possibly argue successfully with me, that one had to turn one's back to one's own children in order to pursue the vaguest of all possible goals to enter into the world of the Narwhal. I was so thoroughly convinced that I was right that I got carried away and shouted angry words at her. She was not in any way flustered by my outburst. Not everybody has to do that, she said. Only sorcerers who want to enter into the other world. There are plenty of good sorcerers who see and are incomplete. To be complete is only for us Toltecs. Take Soledad, for instance. She is the best witch you can find, and she's incomplete. She had 2 children. One of them was a girl. Fortunately for Soledad, her daughter died. The Narwhal said that the edge of the spirit of a person who dies goes back to the givers, meaning that the edge goes back to the parents. If the givers are dead and the person has children, the edge goes to the child who is complete. And if all the children are complete, then the edge goes to the one with power and not necessarily to the best or the most diligent. For example, when Josephina's mother died, the edge went to the craziest of the lot, Josephina. It should have gone to her brother, who was a hard-working, responsible man, but Josephina was more powerful than her brother. Soledad's daughter died without leaving any children, and Soledad got a boost that closed half her hole. Now the only hope for her to close it completely is for Pablito to die. And by the same token, Pablito's great hope for a boost is for Soledad to die. I told her in very strong terms that what she was saying was disgusting and horrifying to me. She agreed that I was right. She affirmed that at one time she herself had believed that particular sorcerer's stand was the ugliest thing possible. She looked at me with shining eyes. There was something malicious about her grin. The narwhal told me that you understand everything, but you don't want to do anything about it, she said in a soft voice. I began to argue again. I told her that what the narwhal had said about me had nothing to do with her revulsion for her particular stand that we were discussing. I explained that I liked children and that I had the most profound respect for them, and that I emphasized very deeply that their helplessness in the awesome world around them, I could not conceive of hurting a child in any sense, not for any reason. The narwhal didn't make the rule, she said. Screw this book thing up. The rule is made somewhere out there, not by man. I defended myself by saying that I was not angry with her or with the narwhal, but that I was arguing in the abstract because I could not fathom the value of it all. The value is that we all need our edge, all of our power, our completeness in order to enter into the other world, she said. I was a religious woman. I tell you what I used to repeat without knowing what I meant. I wanted my soul to enter the kingdom of heaven. I still want that, except I'm on a different path. The world of the narwhal is the kingdom of heaven. I objected to her religious connotation. On principle, I had become accustomed by Don Juan never to dwell on that subject. She very calmly explained that she saw no difference in terms of lifestyle between us and true nuns and priests. She pointed out that not only were true nuns and priests complete as a rule, and they did not even weaken themselves with sexual acts. The narwhal said that is the reason they will never be exterminated. No matter who tries to exterminate them, she said, those who are after them are always empty. They don't have the vigor that the true nuns and priests have. I like the narwhal for saying that. I always cheer for the nuns and priests. We are alike. We have given up the world, and yet we are in the midst of it. The priests and the nuns would make great flying sorcerers if someone would tell them that they can do it. The memory of her father's and her grandfather's admiration for the Mexican Revolution came to my mind, of my father's, not hers, came to my mind. They mostly admired the attempt to exterminate the clergy. My father inherited that admiration from his father, and I inherited it from both of them. It was a sort of affiliation that we had. One of the first things that Don Juan had undermined in my personality was that affiliation. I once told Don Juan that, as I was voicing my own opinion, something I had heard all my life, that the favorite ploy of the church was to keep us in ignorance. Don Juan had a most serious expression on his face. It was as if my statement had touched a deep fiber in him. I thought immediately of the centuries of exploitation that the Indians had endured. Those dirty bastards, he says, they have kept me in ignorance, and you too. I caught his irony right away, and we both laughed. I had never really examined the stand. I did not believe it, but I had nothing else to take its place. I told Don Juan that my grandfather and father, in their views on religion, I told Don Juan about my grandfather and father and their views on religion as the liberal men they were. It doesn't matter what anybody else says or does, he said. You must be an impeccable man yourself. The fight is right here in this chest, and he patted my chest gently. If your grandfather and father would be trying to be impeccable warriors, Don Juan went on, they wouldn't have time for petty fights. It takes all the time and all the energy we have to conquer the idiocy in us. and that's all that matters. The rest is of no importance. Nothing of what your grandfather or father said about the church gave them any well-being. To be an impeccable warrior, on the other hand, will give you vigor and youth and power. So it is proper for you to choose wisely. My choice was the impeccable and the simplicity of a warrior's life. Because of that choice, I felt I had to take LaGuardia's words in a most serious manner, and that was more threatening to me than even Don Gennaro's acts. He used to frighten me at the most profound level. His actions, although terrifying, were assimilated. However, were assimilated, however, into a coherent continuum of their teachings. LaGuardia's words and actions were a different kind of threat to me, somehow more concrete and real than the other. LaGuardia's body shivered for a moment. A ripple went through it, making her contract the muscles of her shoulders and arms. She grabbed the edge of the table with an awkward rigidity. Then she relaxed until she was again herself. She smiled at me. Her eyes and smile were dazzling. She said in a casual tone that she had just seen my dilemma. It is useless to close your eyes and pretend that you don't want to do anything or that you don't know anything, she said. You can do that with people, but not with me. I know why the Narwhal commissioned me to tell you all this. I'm a nobody. You admire great people. The Narwhal and Gennaro were the greatest of all. She stopped and examined me. She seemed to be waiting for my reaction to what she had said. You fought against the Narwhal and Gennaro. But you fought against what the Narwhal and Gennaro told you all the way, she went on. That's why you're behind. And you fought them because they were great. That's your particular way of being. But you can't fight against what I tell you, because you can't look up to me at all. I am your peer. I am in your cycle. You like to fight those who are better than you. It's no challenge to fight my stand. So those two devils have finally bagged you through me. Poor little Narwhal, you've lost the game. She came closer to me and whispered in my ear that the Narwhal had also said that she should never try to take my writing pad away from me, because that would be as dangerous as trying to snatch a bone from a hungry dog's mouth. She put her arms around me, resting her head on my shoulders, and laughed quietly and softly. Her seeing had numbed me. I knew that she was absolutely right. She had pegged me to perfection. She hugged me for a long time with her head against mine. The proximity of her body somehow was very soothing. She was just like Don Juan at that. She exuded strength and conviction and purpose. She was wrong to say that I could not admire her. Let's forget this, she said suddenly. Let's talk about what we have to do tonight. What exactly are we going to do tonight, Gorda? We're having our last appointment with power. Is it another dreadful battle with somebody? No, the little sisters are simply going to show you something that will complete your visit here. The Narwhal told me that after that you may go away and never return, or that you may choose to stay with us. Either way, what they have to show you is part of their art, the art of the dreamer. And what is that art? Gennaro told me that he tried time and time again to acquaint you with the art of the dreamer. He showed you his other body, his body of dreaming. Once he even made you be in two places at once. But your emptiness did not let you see what he was pointing out to you. It looks as if his efforts all went through that hole in your body. Now it seems that it is different. Gennaro made the little sisters the dreamers that they are, and tonight they will show you Gennaro's art. In that respect, the little sisters are the true children of Gennaro. That reminded me of what Pablito had said earlier, that we were the children of both and that we were Toltecs. I asked her what he meant by that. The narwhal told me that sorcerers used to be called Toltecs in his benefactor's language, she replied. And what language was that, Lagorda? I get this. He never told me, but he and Gennaro used to speak a language that none of us could understand. In here, between all of us, we understand 4 Indian languages. Did Gennaro also say that he was a Toltec? His benefactor was the same man, and he also said the same thing. From Lagorda's response, I could surmise that she either did not know a great deal about the subject or she did not want to talk to me about it. I had confronted her with my conclusions. She confessed that she had never paid much attention to it and wondered why I was putting so much value on it. I practically gave her a lecture on the ethnography of central Mexico. A sorcerer is a Toltec when the sorcerer has received the mysteries of stalking and dreaming, she said casually. The narwhal and Gennaro received those mysteries from their benefactor, and they held them in their bodies. We are doing the same, and because of that, we are Toltecs like the narwhal and Gennaro. The narwhal taught you and me equally to be dispassionate. I am more dispassionate than you because I am formless. You still have your form and are empty, so you get caught up in every snag. One day, however, you will be complete again, and you will understand then that the narwhal was right. He said that the world of people goes up and down, and people go up and down with their world. As sorcerers, we have no business following them in their ups and downs. The art of sorcerers is to be outside everything and to be unnoticeable. More than anything else, the art of sorcerers is never to waste their power. The narwhal told me that our problem is that you always get caught up in idiocies, like what you are doing now. I am sure that you're going to ask every one of us about the Toltecs, but you're not going to ask any one of us about our attention. Her laughter was clear and contagious. I admitted to her that she was right. Small issues had always fascinated me. I had also told her that I was mystified by her usage of the word attention. I've told you already that the narwhal told me about attention, she said. We hold the images of the world with our attention. A male sorcerer is very difficult to train because his attention is always closed, focusing on something. A female, on the other hand, is always open because most of the time she is not focusing her attention on anything, especially during her menstrual period. The narwhal told me and then showed me that during that time I could actually let my attention go from the images of the world. If I didn't focus my attention on the world collapses. How is that done, Gorda? It's very simple. When a woman menstruates, she cannot focus her attention. That's the crack the narwhal told me about. Instead of fighting to focus, a woman should let go of the images by gazing fixedly at distant hills, or by gazing at water like a river, or by gazing at the clouds. If you gaze with your eyes open, you get dizzy and the eyes get tired. But if you half close them and blink a lot and move them from mountain to mountain or from cloud to cloud, you can look for hours or days if necessary. The narwhal used to make us sit by the door and gaze at those round hills on the other side of the valley. Sometimes we used to sit there for days until the crack would open. I wanted to hear more about it, but she stopped talking and hurriedly sat very close to me. She signaled me with her hand to listen. I heard a faint swishing sound, and suddenly Lydia stepped out into the kitchen. I thought that she must have been asleep in their room, and the sound of our voices had woken her up. That's the end of part 1 of chapter 5.